Hey guys, welcome back to the Paladin's Alliance, and I want to talk about Katowice yet again. So we've had a lot of storylines coming to fruition here, and I want to talk specifically about MOUZ because before Katowice, they were a team that I severely wrote off, and with how Rops was almost like 1 foot out the door, and you had Frozen looking kind of demotivated and Dexter looking not really. I think that he didn't have much synergy with Mither, and it looked like this team was really falling apart. And again, A-Core didn't really look like a promising AWP player that we saw on Mad Lions. But after these moves came in and they came onto Katowice, they were all guns blazing throughout the play-in, and they showed signs of significant promise, and it made me feel like I wanted to watch this team again, especially after how they took Vitality to a close 3 maps, right? And I have to admit, I don't necessarily like BMOS in this lineup. I like JDC, and I like the synergy that he has with Torzy and Cyclone, but I will have to talk about them at face value, and I will later on in this video. But the 3 main factors for me on this team and whether or not their success actually comes to fruition are as follows. Obviously, an MBK is getting more acclimated as time goes on, so that's always a great thing to see. And I think as time goes on, he's just going to get better and better because he has just boatloads of experience, and that's just how his game is. He doesn't need to be the best fragger on the team, but he definitely needs to be, acclimated to the environment, and so that'll come with time. But the main 3 factors that I'm looking at is Dexter's calling. Is it going to improve now that he has youngsters on his team that'll motivate him to perform well and integrate his system alongside Cyclone's? That's one big factor. The other big factor is Frozen going to have his whole Rops era now? Is he going to start taking charge on this team and taking more star roles and getting those high ratings like he did so way back when at Flashpoint 3? And then finally, can Torzy maintain this form that he showed at Katowice, which was a blinding form? However, as we've seen with a lot of good tier 1 operas that burst onto the scene, they get found out, they get understood, and we saw with players like Searson, where they were able to have a good run of form for a little while, but then eventually their flash percentages started to go up and they started to get found out much more. Will we see that with the youngster like Torzy to really buckle under the pressure? So these 3 main factors are things that I want to talk about the most, and I will pick out some rounds as to why Katowice was such a good event for MOUZ, and why I think that they have potential to surprise, and why their EPL group looks pretty good for them. So we'll start with the first factor, basically talking about how whether or not Dexter belongs as a tier 1 IGL, and there's definitely some rounds where I think his mid-rounding is very good, which is the round that I picked out here specifically. But his set rounds can feel very one-dimensional and very readable as a CT that's playing against MOUZ. And I think what separates them from being a good to great great calling team is through these mid-round plays, and whether or not Dexter can channel that Australian style of gameplay where they have these very good mid-rounds that can help elevate them to become a better team. So I'll just show you what a good example of a good mid-round call is from MOUZ. So they throw these standard outside smokes like they have been doing for a long time during this half, and they send in 2 of the players, NBK and Dexter, down to the lower bomb site, and then they leave Frozen up here in garage to let him lurk. And this allows MOUZ to do a lot of things, and while usually it's been just Frozen staying back and getting that lurking kill on the player rotating from outside to secret, they actually decide to do a little bit more with Frozen in this round, especially with JDC watching any of this lobby crunch that OG wants to do, and luckily he gets to catch it free of charge here. Obviously he takes a little bit of damage, but he gets the kill on a Flame Z, and now that that's happened, it dissuades OG from necessarily like going more aggressive past lobby, right? So they have this lobby control, but at the same time, MOUZ has all of this lower control, and especially after Dexter getting that kill on a Nico, it feels very telegraphed that MOUZ will go down to the lower bomb site. They've done it so often before, especially after killing the lower bomb site anchor. But now that that's happened, and they're aware that lobby is gone, they actually decide to pivot back. Now that they have Frozen all the way outside, can lurk all the way up heaven, which we'll see now. And then you also have, so that JDC kill also confirms that Dexter and Torzy can now march up the vents, and then they can leave NBK down the lower site, and they've baited out so much personnel to basically take care of that problem, that now they have a free upper bomb site. And to boot, they also have Frozen in heaven to cut off any rotates. So it's like this foolproof mid-rounding plan that instead of going down to the lower bomb site, they pivot back late and go back to the upper bomb site, and it works beautifully. You can see here Torzy has free sight lines onto the player coming in from Hut, and now a 3v2 will never ever favor a CT, and so they have to fall off, and the round goes firmly in favor of MOUZ. And this was something that I saw that Dexter was performing very well, where he finally found this flow state, and he did very well against OG, specifically on this map of Nuke, where he was able to get those really, really clean mid rounds. And I saw a little bit of it back when he was playing on those Australian rosters, but haven't been been able to see him replicate it as much here on MOUZ. And if he can channel that, that's where I can see these youngsters really shine and prosper, because they do very well in the post plant. They have a very good understanding of how to play the post plant. And if that's the case, then we could see MOUZ really pivot to that style and find their identity, because before this, they weren't able to find such an identity, and I hope that they can do so. This round that I've picked out here is basically showing the amount of potential that MOUZ has as a roster when NBK is allowed to create so much space and let the youngsters shine and let them feel more comfortable in taking some aim duels, right? And it all is predicated on man disadvantage situations and how they handle it. And before, you know, if a specific player was dead, you'd feel as though, you know, maybe MOUZ isn't capable of winning this round. And it's actually very impressive as to how they turn this round around, because, you know, they're very all in on having an upper execute. They throw a mini smoke. They have NBK trying to throw utility as well and Squeaky, and then they send 3-man Hut. But they aren't able to properly trade out against Nexa, and instead, Frozen has to go for 2-for-1, and they kind of have to rest on their laurels here and say, look, we've kind of went all in on the on the lobby push, and it didn't work out. So let's chill here for a little while and see what we can do. And so they just chill. They sit back, see if they can find any lurk behind them, because they're aware, right, that they have to be crunched onto lobby. OG is very well aware of that. And so it comes down to all micro nuances and whether or not they can win aim duels, right? Because if not, the round peters out and they lose the round. But if they can trade well, then there's still legs on the round. So they molly off Hut here, and they say, let's go all in on Squeaky. So NBK prepares here, a flash is thrown, and this immediately propels NBK to go down mini, and it creates so much space, and it forces OG to make a decision and basically triage the situation and force them to take matters into one section of the map. And they force the team to look at NBK. And while all this is happening, Frozen also gets a trade onto the Cubby player, and it leaves only Nico here on Hut. And this is well communicated to NBK. And while he isn't able to convert that kill, that's something that I think he could easily trade maybe 3 months down the line. It gives all the communication to a young gun like Torzy to really do work here. Here's the drop down, gets the kill onto Nico here, leaves it down to a 1v1. And this is where, again, Torzy has shown that he is very capable of winning clutches. He's done quite a few at this tournament in and of itself. And he wins the eventual clutch here against Valde. So I think the capabilities of MOUZ as a core of fraggers is really interesting, and I think NBK allows that trio to be much elevated, and that's why I gave him such a high rating on my report cards video, and why I think MOUZ just immediately looks like a better team, a more cohesive team, because of how willing NBK is to free up the fraggers of this team. The problem is that a lot of the rounds they won on the T side were because of this, because of these very clutch situations, 3v3s, 2v3s, 4v3s, and I'm very hopeful that it won't turn into a Flashpoint 3 situation where all these players are fragging out of their minds and then they fall off a cliff and it's not really sustainable. I hope that these set rounds can get a little bit more developed. I hope that JDC or Xertion can get put permanently into Bimas's position, because then you have a wide berth of players to look to provide a number of frags. You don't have to all put it on towards his shoulders, or Frozen's rather, and kind of free them up to do as they please on the T side. And if that's the case, then I think the sky's the limit for MOUZ. But if not, then it's going to be difficult to see whether or not they can realize their potential. And that's why I titled this MOUZ's incredible potential, Katowice potential, because there is potential there. But whether or not it'll be realized is still yet to be seen. And I'm sure EPL will be the best litmus test to see whether or not they can perform well. I think another big problem that MOUZ Sports might have, or MOUZ rather, might have is the fact that Torzy is a young player and he hasn't necessarily experienced all these tight moments. And if you live and die by his success, then you live and die by a double-edged sword that, while sometimes can help you get across the line, it could also be a huge detriment and absolutely melt the round apart because of his careless decision-making as a younger player, right? So in this round specifically, you basically have Vitality on the back foot, right? You're almost on that breaking point of their economy, and you have this aggressive ramp setup. You have all this map control, but you don't have sidewalk, right? You don't have the ramp leading into sidewalk, right? And that's a major problem. And they hear the spam coming out, and for some reason, I think Torzy just believes that he can come in and get a pick and then bound out, but it's very, very difficult to do it against Vitality, who love their ramp control and love to, goad teams and players into facing them, right? Even through that smoke. So he takes that pick, and Zayu eats him for lunch there, and that really leaves this whole ramp setup in disarray. It's really difficult for them to perform, and that tag is heard, and now they're aware that there's a player here. And although JDC pulls one back elsewhere on the B side of the map, it's still very difficult now that ramp is firmly in their control, right? They've found out Frozen, they've tagged him up, and there's just nowhere for you to go. And this is all predicated on, now that the AWP is down, now that Torzy is down, Vitality have free reign. They can do as they please, and they really take over on this map. And I believe it goes into overtime, but the momentum is always in Vitality's favor, and it breaks Torzy's confidence after that play. And if you live and die by a youngster's confidence and don't really have a game plan for him and let him just kind of do what he wants, you're kind of making your success volatile at on that same token. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see a wider distribution of fraggers on this team, so it doesn't have to be on Torzy. Maybe we can allow Torzy to do this if you have a player like JDC, a player like Xerxin in the place of MOUZ, because I don't think MOUZ is consistent enough for him to have a spot on this team. Perhaps on another team where he can start to grow a lot more, but I think the synergy that Torzy has with Cyclone that we can clearly see will also work in the favor of the team if they can have a player like JDC or Xerxin on the squad as well. So that's it for my MOUZ potential video. I wanted to do a Group A preview, very similar to what I did last year, where I would have a group, right before every group, I would have a video out on a specific team or player. And I think the Katowice potential that MOUZ showed was warranted another video, because they have a pretty relatively easier group, and I think they can succeed and get out and go into the playoffs. And if that's the case, they'll get a lot of stage time, they'll get a lot of practice on LAN, and I think it'll make the team realize how necessary it is to call up another player from MOUZ NXT and really assert themselves as a great team. I think the success that they can have with MOUZ is there, but I don't think it's as high as I think it can be if they do get another player from the MOUZ NXT roster, especially with a player like NBK who is willing to set up these pieces, and a coach that has also played with them and understands their tendencies like Cyclone. I think that they can definitely reach new heights as an organization, and maybe bottle some of that success that they had with Kerrigan's lineup way back when, because they're doing such a good job molding the talent through the academy scene. And as you saw with the HLTV rankings, it's very warranted, right? So if you guys like this video, stay tuned, subscribe, because we're going to have more EPL content in the future. Follow every week. I have a podcast idea that is in the rumor mill and is being concocted as we speak, and you'll have more news on that soon. And if you want to support me on Patreon, we will have a monthly Patreon discussion that you can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. All of the proceeds go to getting better ideas out on the table and lets me do more out there content. And that's really it for me. So enjoy EPL, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.